Good day and welcome. I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard. Today is March 4th, 2026, and you're watching The Pipeline. I've got the usual crew here, former Western Standard opinion editor Nigel Hannaford.
Good afternoon.
Senior Alberta columnist Cory Morgan.
Good day.
And news editor Dave Naylor.
Thanks for sticking me with the guy who's got pickled sausage gurgling around his stomach.
Most of it's cleared out now. It's not the stomach where the problem is.
Oh. You're lucky I've left my pickled herring at home, but that's my jam. That's probably much worse than just the pickled sausage you're eating.
Yeah, well, I went to Seven Persons, and they got a beautiful big sausage shop actually down there. I had to buy something, so I bought a big jar of pickled sausages and ate them while I drove for a few hours.
That's what's on sale.
Nothing else that you couldn't. Well, it was a sausage place, you know what I mean? Is there good road snacks? Either way, everybody, including Jane, is paying the price for my indulgence.
Okay. All right.
Price it is.
All right. Well, we're going to be talking about the war between Israel and Iran and the United States, the implications there, Canada's reaction to it, and the broader West's reaction to it, the politics going on around it, and also the local effects, what the war means for Canada, and in particular for Alberta. Does Danielle Smith regret not tabling her budget just a few days later as oil goes to wartime levels? But we're going to start first with a curious decision of the federal government. It wasn't even a court decision, just decision of the federal government to give Vancouver away, sort of, maybe opening the door to having to give it away. The Musqueam First Nation, I guess, had laid claim to not Metro Vancouver and quite an area around it. Fishing rights and whatnot, and Ottawa just said, yeah, sure, have it. And this has started squabbles now with some other Indigenous groups in the area. I think what's the one that was fighting this now in court? Cowichan, is it the Cowichan?
I don't know. There's
Squamish.
I think it's the Squamish.
Cowichan's on the island.
Yeah.
No, it's Richmond.
Yeah. No, the Cowichan got a different strip of land that people live on. Right. So Cory, the Musqueam now. It's not fair to say they own it. They can just walk in any office tower and kick everyone out, and this is their land now. But Ottawa has granted some significant rights to them that seem to further erode the quicksand below the feet of British Columbians' very basic property rights.
Yeah, people are rightly concerned because of the Richmond one. Everybody was told not to worry about that either, and suddenly they found that they can't get their mortgages renewed, and businesses pulling the heck out of there because they can't finance things. Because, I mean, they might not have taken the land, but they put such a question mark on it that it's virtually valueless unless something is resolved. This isn't the same with Musqueam, but what people are seeing is a step in the same direction. So yeah, it's talking about just giving increased control for fisheries and emergency management, marine things, which are kind of odd considering they just had dugout canoes to begin with. But it's another one of those just endless agreements, and it covers a lot of land, but it's again these question marks.
Let's make sure we got an image up on the screen there of this thing. This is some of the most expensive real estate in North America.
Oh, yeah.
In the world.
And the Musqueams, if you might remember, you might not, but in the 90s, there was a big stink with that because they had a lot of expensive housing leased on what was Musqueam land. And they turned over the leasing ability to the band because it used to be run by the federal government. And they hit people with like retroactive 4,000% increases in their lease rates. Oh, yeah, look it up. People walked away from their homes. This happened in the 90s. Though, to be fair, it was a gross like $100 a year lease rate they'd been getting for a long, long time. Either way, it's an active band in some very valuable land down there. It's the question marks again that are part of the problem. So the chief, Wayne Sparrow, I'm looking at this. He's saying, because there's discussions, there's only federal crown lands considered for potential land transfers and other negotiations. So again, he's already talking about land transfers. But as we know too, it doesn't tend to stop there. So people are rightly worried anyways, and there's a lot of lack of clarity on this.
So, Dave, a BC's land claims are a mess because they're, for the most part, not covered by treaties the way, say, Alberta and Saskatchewan are. So it is, to be fair to these bands, it's a bit more ambiguous. There are probably some legitimate claims, but, as we saw with the Cowichan decision with Richmond, they say, hey, my great-great-great-great-grandfather was fishing there once, so therefore it's mine. These things are flimsy, but Ottawa just made the decision on its own, and now you've got the Cowichan putting up its hand and saying, no, not so fast. It's our land, or at least big portions of that are ours.
Yeah, it's very, very weird. The biggest idiot in all this is David Eby. He's excuse me. He's running around claiming he doesn't know anything and doing a Sergeant Schultz impersonation. I know nothing. But the federal officials say he attended the briefings and he was there at the signing. So somebody's not telling the truth. And
it might be David Eby.
It might be David Eby. I think if I was a Vancouver owner, one of the questions I would be asking is the BC government promised to, I don't know if the right word is insure the homeowners in Richmond, 120 of them or so that were affected, they would back their mortgages. If I'm living in Vancouver now, hey, is somebody going to back my $4 million mortgage? It's as Derek said, it's some of the priciest real estate in the world, and a lot of money involved here.
It's Nigel. It's there's. I can't imagine how the federal government could backstop every mortgage in Vancouver. That'll also then open up. We're not talking. That'd be a gargantuan enterprise to undertake. You'd end up having taxpayers backing some mortgages that probably should not be backed, even if you didn't have a land claims issue. It would cost a wild amount of money. Huge amounts of Vancouver are owned by like Hong Kong and China anyway. So we'd be backing foreign mortgages just to try and back our domestic mortgages at the same time. But there's a dark part of me that's kind of chuckling. It's a part of me that shouldn't exist, but I can't help that this part exists. That's like all these downtown Vancouver types who just vote. Oh yeah, I'll vote for New Democrats and Liberals who support UNDRIP, UN Declaration on Indigenous Protection or whatever. I'll vote for all these crazy things. They like to say land back, return the land, because they assume the land back is in the bush somewhere. Some hillbilly owns it, and it doesn't really bother them, and people can return to hunting and gathering, and everything will be great. Before the European came, but it turns out what they've wanted was downtown Vancouver, their house. So there, I don't know. Maybe you're a better person than me, but there is a dark part of me that's kind of like, you voted for it.
No, I mean, the reason that I stayed with you 3 years, Derek, is that I think there was the same dark part. And that part is so easy to feed, Look, some of these people really deserve what they're getting. And now most don't. But I was informed anecdotally just yesterday that there are people in the affected areas putting signs on their lawn saying, proud to live on native land. Well, if that's what you think.
Well, that could mean either way. Cory might say something like that, trying to piss people off. Yeah. So I'm not actually sure what's meant by that. That could mean two very different things.
Well, no, it means they are sucking up. They are the kind of people who probably thought exactly what you thought, that this wasn't going to come close to them, but it would be very good if somebody else gave land back. Mm-hmm. That would be the right thing to do. So they put these stupid signs on their driveways and on their front lawns. So there's a certain part of me that says, if you keep giving land acknowledgements and say we're very proud to be here on ceded territory, or we're very proud to be on the traditional territory of the such and such tribe, one of these days somebody's going to come calling and say, yes, you're right. You are on our land. Get off it, or pay for it, or something like that. And that's what we are now starting to see. But what is a puzzle to me, and I think probably a puzzle to all of us, is why our senior politicians go along with it so easily. And that's where the dark part of Nigel Hannaford starts to bubble up and froth, because I actually think that our senior politicians would rather do this than face up to it and deal with it. In the interest of reconciliation, they would rather do this because they feel that if they take a hard line, they will have protests, terrorism, perhaps, more repeats of what you saw on the Northern Pipeline out to Kitimat a few years ago, and that it will be a situation that they can't control. It's cowardly, and I could be wrong, but that's what it looks like to me.
I don't know. This looks like a big opening for, the BC Conservatives and the federal Conservatives to Vancouver voters, really everyone in BC, to say, we'll put an end to this madness. We will repeal UNDRIP. I think, what's her name? She's kind of she's leading some of the polls.
Christine Elliott?
Christine Elliott, I think she's talked about, am I correct? She's talked about repealing UNDRIP?
I'm going to say that.
Don't know.
Okay, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I know some of the candidates are talking about that. Maybe I'm confusing it with one BC. One BC's talked about it, but
They might have finally pushed things too far, though. I mean, people have been to Vancouver, North Van, nice houses, and there's a reserve right there down by the water side, right there. I mean, it's 3/4, but there's those champagne socialists, loads of them, and it's kind of like we've all been saying. It's great when you're giving away somebody else's stuff, but it's amazing how quickly their tune changes when it's their own. So maybe that's what Canada needs. Let's loose some houses so that people will bloody well wake up on the ridiculousness of where you can go.
Cory, we can't be too smug on this here in Alberta. All our land is treaty land. I actually looked it up before I came to work. Total 100% treaty land. However, we have a judicial system that rewrites the rules on the fly. Nobody could have predicted this Cowichan decision last year. If you go through the thing carefully, you find that the judge was quite creative in her interpretations and indeed used a lot of native language as a politeness to the other side, suggesting some people have suggested she might be a little sympathetic to them. So you get a judge with a very different idea about whether the treaties were ever fairly negotiated in the first place, and just says, that doesn't count anymore. Guess what, Calgary? Edmonton, are you listening?
Well, I'm aware of it. I'm going before a judge on June 30th on a Indigenous battle. And,
Canadians are just sheep. It's frustrating. Why isn't there marches in Vancouver of all these homeowners saying, hands off our land? Right? I mean, I would think that maybe at some point, at some point it's got to happen, but it could happen quicker than people think.
Well, to stop that from happening, because people will, look at all the, the elbows up types. They're defending. They got these big home values. They're voting kind of status quo political parties. They're voting for Carney and stuff. People do not mess around when it comes to their homes. It's their biggest, for overwhelming number of people, it's the biggest asset if they have a home. The feds are not going to allow it to happen. So what you probably would see is just Cowichan times a million, where, okay, the feds come in and they start backstopping it. We're going to continue to socialize this cost out to people across Canada. Canadians across the country are going to be forced to carry the mortgages of people in Vancouver. If, say, all of Vancouver flipped over, I mean, that seems almost dystopian. But, I mean, it happened on a small scale with Cowichan.
Blocks of Vancouver be into the billions.
Yeah.
They kind of look at the
so what you're going to see is this is just going to get socialized, because I think these people, West Van, they're beside a reserve, and, say that, their land comes into question. They're not going to want to be me. I don't think they're going to flip and say, F off, this is my land, you pushed it too far, we're not friends anymore. They're not going to do that. They're too wrapped up in it. They're going to plead, and Ottawa's going to come in, and the taxpayer is going to bail them out, and we're just going to socialize this cost.
Yeah, but the whole thing is we've got to stop sucking up to First Nations. We've got to stop these ridiculous land acknowledgements. We were shocked last week, Derek, listening to a UCP cabinet minister, Mike Ellis, do a land acknowledgement. Do a land acknowledgement.
He should know better.
Other ministers have been doing it in Alberta too. That's just the first time somebody popped it up to us with a video.
Well, we did a search.
No, we did an in-depth dive. He's the only one.
Okay, good. Otherwise, I'm glad to be wrong.
It's done in the legislature every Monday to kick off the week, and it's done at the opening of a session.
Still too much.
Still too much. And but this is a cross Canada problem. It's not Alberta. I mean, every single every single press conference in Eastern Canada starts with a land acknowledgement.
I go to a Jim and Lapidary Club general meeting once a month. Yeah, I don't hang out with the cool kids. They start those out with a land acknowledgement. It pains me.
Well, in Calgary itself, we changed the name Fort Calgary to the Confluence, which just sounds like, I don't know, a hotel or some kind of posh bar or something. Fort Calgary, the very heart that built Calgary. There was no Calgary before Fort Calgary. We don't have Fort Calgary anymore. The previous administration changed that. Unfortunately, we've questioned the current mayor when he was running if he would change that. Jeremy Farkas, he says no.
Yeah, that's the frustrating thing. There's no action on it. We got a whole new revamped council, and not one of them wants to touch it.
And they're doing land acknowledgements before the meetings.
No, everybody's afraid. Disgraceful.
Why are we still afraid of this shit?
This is chicken. I mean, you go to City Hall as well. Look at that garbage dump of a memorial they have from way back when the Kamloops Buried Children hoax began. Mm-hmm. And there was a fenced area with a bunch of teddy bears and shoes to represent the children buried in Kamloops, even though it's become almost clear as day that this was a hoax. And that thing's been vandalized multiple times. There's some of the irony. It turned out when they chased the vandal, it wasn't a white nationalist. It was a homeless First Nations person who burnt it. But it's still there. It's still there. It looks awful. It's a mess. But nobody's got the courage to ever, whether it's an official or real, just say, you know what? It's done. It's time.
It's time to raise the flag from half-mast Canada. We have been in figurative half-mast for too long. Okay. Let's feel something more cheerful. War.
Or gang up on Derek time, as this.
Gang up on Derek time. Yeah. As Supreme Leader of the office. All right. So I don't know. I interviewed Stockwell Day. We had kind of a friendly debate. Just Monday, I think it was. I talked to Adam Zivo, an independent journalist who was hanging out in Tel Aviv. I've already kind of made my own views known. This is not America's war. This is not in America's interest. In fact, it, in some ways, I think is against America's interest. I think they've been drug into it by Israel, which has geopolitical aims for the region. And who knows how far out this could spin out of control. It's already resulted in Gulf nations being hit with Iranian ballistic and cruise missiles. I don't know. It's hard to tell how bad this could get. Maybe it's kind of similar to the 12 Days War. They just pound Iran and nothing much changes. But in America's interest or not, I propose to you, Cory, that the two main, the excuse for the war changes hourly at this point, but the two main ones they went with, which were pretty much the Iraq excuses, which is on the verge of nuclear weapons, which according to Netanyahu, they have been weeks away since 1995. That's one excuse. And the other one is regime change, which, who knows if that happens? It's not going to just happen through a peaceful color revolution. Best case scenario, it'll be a big civil war. God knows how many people die, and we get flooded with refugees again. That's probably the best case scenario for regime change. More likely, the regime just clamps down, gasses and shoots a bunch of people, and nothing changes. Those are the two big excuses given for the war. Or I'm being uncharitable. Justifications given for the war. Do you buy either of those?
I don't know. I admit that with the second Gulf War, when they were looking for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and they turned out not to be there, it speaks a lot to the limits on intelligence or the justification they'll put out. But it's undeniable that Iran was not just a benign wart hanging out in the Middle East all by itself. It was funding terrorism all over the place, and it's the most cowardly way, I think, of these dictators. At least, Saddam wore it on his sleeve. Iran funds others to take care of their ugliness, whether it's Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, you name it, as well, against their own people. We talked 30,000 demonstrators slaughtered in 5 days for trying to stand up to him. As you said, the civil war would be bloody over there. The question, I guess, is whether or not it's the place of America to play police and go in and do that. But Israel is very directly been hit and threatened and rocketed. And
Well, yes, but they started a war. They're going to get hit.
October 7th never would have happened without loads of Iranian help going into Gaza for years to get them armed up and trained up and able to hit as they hit.
There's a very direct connection between Iran and Hezbollah because they're both radical revolutionary
And
Shias.
Hamas.
A bit with Hamas, but
No,
not much.
they funded October 7th, Eric.
They're involved, but they're not the main backer of Hamas. Hamas is radical Sunni, kind of mixed with local parochial nationalism, but they're radical Sunni Salafists.
The Shiite Sunni thing gets set aside because one thing they can agree on is they all hate the Jews. And so there's no difficulty with Iranian money coming into Hamas, even if they weren't as tightly in bed as Hezbollah is. But I mean, the bottom line is, and how many times has the Ayatollah had to say, we need to wipe Israel off the map? I think it's a pretty good direct threat for Israel to respond to.
Yes, but that is Israel's argument for it. But there's no America. There's no big American.
Of course there is. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. You were just going on. Iran has been killing Americans for decades. Right? One of the first things that happened when the Ayatollah came back from exile is they captured those American hostages, kept them for 448 days. The Marine station in Beirut blown up, hundreds of dead Americans. Americans have been killed all over the world by Iran-funded terrorism.
So is this really is this a vengeance mission?
No, it's to prevent Americans being killed in the future.
When's the last time Iran killed an American soldier before this?
I'm not talking soldier. I'm talking terrorism.
Or civilian. When's the last time Iran targeted someone on American soil? It just hasn't really happened.
Well, what about the Austin, Texas shooting this week? Was inspired by
inspired maybe. Who knows? And ISIS. There's ISIS inspired people. Look, the Iranians are they're about as bad as you get, but they're not a direct security threat to the United States. They're a security threat to Israel, no doubt. But they're not a threat to the United States.
So we'll see if the proof ever shows up. As I said, I have some skepticism after the last Gulf War, but it's not beyond belief that they were having a nuclear program getting close to. And if there's any state in the world that is ideologically crazy enough to actually use a nuke, maybe the option.
But then that would put a lie to the 12 Days War, where they said they set their nuclear program back by years, if not decades. That wasn't even a full year ago, was it? So either they were lying then or they're lying now or lying both times. But they can't be telling the truth both times.
Setting it back by years isn't enough when you want to completely eliminate it.
Yeah, but Netanyahu says weeks away. And he is on the record saying we are mere weeks away since 1995. I was 10 years old. So, is at least as far back as it goes, saying literally weeks away.
If he had been done to Iran over all these years, they probably would have had one by now.
Well, gents, I got a rather different take on this, and I don't think any of you are. I don't think you're actually wrong. It's just that you haven't perhaps explored whether this isn't really about Iran, but is about China. China basically has colonized Iran in the sense that it has created a forward operating base in the Middle East, sitting right on top of 80% of the world's oil supplies. You might recall that very recently, the Yanks pulled Maduro out of Venezuela. What did he do wrong? Well, he was a bad dude. But the significance of Venezuela wasn't one more bad dude being pulled from the game. It was the fact that the Chinese, who were buying 90% of what Venezuela produced, suddenly had to find a place for oil. And they have been working on Iran for decades to develop Iran as that source. So actually, we think about American imperialism, and we think about the old British Empire, and we have our forces distributed all over the world to seek our best advantage. But that is what China was doing. And they were doing it in Iran, they were doing it in Venezuela. So this really is about kicking China out of the Middle East. So let me just consult a couple of notes. The relationship between China and Iran has extended far beyond the oil that I'm talking about. They have got into a military-industrial entanglement. Iran was on the verge of acquiring Chinese-built ship-killing missiles, things that evade the defenses on American ships, hypersonic. They have been developing diplomatically and with the Belt and Road Initiative all through that area. What's the object? It is to diminish American power in the area and elevate Chinese power around the world. So I would make the point to you that this is about dismantling and disrupting this emerging Chinese power projection before it becomes permanent, rather than solely about the Israel-Iran conflict. And I admit that it is partly to do with that, for very obvious reasons. But that's not all that's going on here. It is China trying to be the new British Empire, the new American imperialism. But this time it's us who are supposed to be at the disadvantage. So Trump, whatever he may say in his news conference, it's because of this, it's because of that. This is where you've got to look for the real reason.
I've seen the argument made around China. I actually think that is probably, at least from a reason for America to be involved. I mean, Israel's got its own reasons. For America to be involved, it's probably the best I've seen, but it's not compelling to me to launch a potential large-scale war. Right now, I can't say it's contained, but it's, we'll see what happens with the Kurds coming over the border, maybe. But, every big war, most big wars start as small wars. And I don't want to play Chicken Little and say this is definitely going to spiral into something big and goes on for years and millions die. I can't tell. The pushing back a potential Chinese outpost, okay, that one I could see as in America's interest, but this would seem to be not the normal, correct American way to do it. Like in the Cold War, someone flirted with the Soviet Union. You didn't just invade the country. You funded their neighbor to push back against them or something. A bit more finesse, a little less death, a little less blood, a little less treasure. This would just seem to be, if that's the case, if it is pushing back a Chinese forward operating base, maybe, this would just not seem to be the smartest way to go about it.
I don't know how else you really would. I mean, a couple of things. One is that it's good for the Americans that the Israelis are involved, because Israeli intelligence in that area is vastly superior to American resources. Now, nobody's come out and said this, but it would be highly surprising if I were to learn that operation, in which on the first day the leadership was totally eliminated, is a consequence of Israeli intelligence, not American. They knew where it was.
That was my assumption, because
they run through the window.
That's my assumption, because the Mossad's legendary. But a lot of what I've seen, it actually is to the contrary. It was the United States actually watching a lot of this. So it was probably a combination of all.
I've heard the opposite. The second day, when all the clerics were together, they dropped a bomb on them. Brilliant intelligence. Nobody does it better than the Mossad. And apparently they had control, or viewing control, of every traffic station, every traffic camera in Tehran. So they could monitor when the supreme leader left his mosque, and when all these 80 people gathered, they're watching it on TV.
And I just got to note the irony and the beautiful part of that, though, because it is a totalitarian state, and they put those cameras in, I'm certain, with a lot of intent to oppress their own people.
Yeah,
it is that irony Mossad's great at, like the pagers. Hey, we actually sold you the device that blew your nuts off, and here you are, you put in to oppress your own people, but we've hacked it so that we can track your own leadership around the streets.
It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
If I may, is that we talk about Iran's government. What we really have is a Muslim equivalent of the Hells Angels running a country. This is not a normal government. Well, this is like this.
But we all agree the Iranian government's bad. I don't think that's really a point of.
Well, no, they really that they're bad. It's just that that it is criminal organization.
It is, in my skepticism.
So is ours.
Part of my enthusiasm, in a way, I wouldn't call it enthusiasm, but optimism or whatever. I think it's almost time for the world to start having it out with radical Islam, which I know is a broader thing to define and so on. But at the same time, well, how well has regime change ended up working on Afghanistan or Syria or Iraq, or anytime they try it? That's part of the problem, is that if you still have a core of radical Islam in the country, the next regime typically isn't any better than the one you just got rid of. They've just changed names.
So here's one of my beefs, though. Why it's not us, but I guess us is the West. But why is America and the West still trying to fight radical Islam over there when we're not really doing it here?
Oh, you don't hear me disagreeing with you there.
It's fair.
Radical Islam is a much bigger threat here than it is over there.
Appreciate it, Eric.
Over there, it's still a problem. It's a I wish it wasn't over there either. But I have an infinitely bigger problem with it right here. Yet we don't do shit about it here.
There was a memorial for the Ayatollah in Brampton.
Yeah.
Held, and as I tweeted, which got a fair response back, I would say, what a perfect place to choose candidates for deportation. Here's the ones. Here's self-identified
Canadian ice vans.
extreme lunatics supporting monsters. Get them the hell out of here. So I fully agree there. Clean up our own.
Like Americans, I saw a good meme. We'll put it up right now. It has it's from The Office. It says, MAGA was promised mass deportations, getting rid of all these illegals. And instead of, Michael Scott saying mass deportations, he says mass deployment in Iran. Trump ran for president 3 times. No new wars, and no war with Iran in particular, because Iran was the neocon wet dream. They've always wanted Iran. And he said no war with Iran, and they get Iran. And Americans are not getting mass deportations. The ICE thing, it's a thing, but it's not nearly as big as everyone's promised. In fact, Obama's deported more people as president. It was just done with less fanfare. So we're in America itself, where you've got Trump. They're not dealing with radical foreign elements the way Republican and MAGA voters were promised, but instead they're getting a war with Iran that they were promised would not happen. So, yeah, radicalism is a big problem. I oppose the war for different reasons than some on the left would. These guys do not see a problem with radicalism. I do, but I see it as a problem here. We should fight it here. We have to take the speck out of our own eye before we take the log out of our neighbors. We have to do both. Let's at least start here before we launch these gigantic wars overseas that are going to kill thousands of people, disrupt the region, and potentially, at least, spiral out of control into something we can't control. And then we've got fifth columns here. Let's deal with that first before we go do it.
Well, this might expose those fifth columns, actually.
And what are we going to do about it?
Well, that's
How many deportation vans were sitting in Brampton waiting for the Ayatollah?
If we do things right on October 19th, we can deport them at least out of Alberta.
Hard for me to argue with that one. You were listening. You brought me right back in.
Or-
You brought me right back in.
There's your headline for tomorrow, Dave.
Well, speaking of bringing this conversation back to Alberta,
Can we just have
yeah.
a quick I'll comment on this? The other thing that nobody talks about is that if you actually separate China from a consistent oil supply, China is going to come looking for it. They've got a reserve that's supposed to keep them going for about 100 days. But this whole situation of starving them out of oil reminds me of the 1930s when the Americans cut the oil off to Japan. And
are you making it? That turned out to be a very bad idea. It resulted in war.
the Japanese came looking for oil because they needed it for their economy. And you all know the story. So this could work if this is actually the plan. So if it does work, then that is where the greater danger of a wider war may come in.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm understanding you. I don't know if you're making pro or con, but like if you're making the analogy there that the United States froze their assets, cut them off from oil, and it left the Japanese with two choices, which was essentially surrender and fold down the empire without a fight, or roll the dice on Pearl Harbor. I don't want to push China into a position where they got to roll the dice on a Pearl Harbor.
I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying that this is where this could go. So if you're making investments, Derek, think of it.
You just scared the hell out of me because I think that
Well, history doesn't repeat itself, but sometimes there are these echoes that come by, and it's a similar circumstances. So
that is okay. Well, great segue to how this affects oil.
You read it here first.
You're gonna have to tease this one out a bit, Nigel, because
Okay.
I don't like that. That's scary. I like beating up on China, constraining China, but I don't want to push them into a Pearl Harbor. Okay, so excellent. a terrifying segue into how this affects Canada and Alberta in particular with oil. Dave, last Thursday, the Alberta government tabled its budget in the legislature. Record deficit, 9.5 billion. Just a bloodbath of red ink. And I'm not too sympathetic to the Alberta government's excuses on this one. Oil's at $60. It's lower than they had projected, but $60, people are still making money. It's not bad oil prices. This is overspending. Some of it's because, we've been swamped by migrants, but a lot of it is we just haven't controlled spending that we can control. It's both. But over the week, she tables out Thursday. We wake up Saturday morning to find, war is broken out and oil is going to certainly spike when markets open Monday morning. If you're Danielle Smith, how much do you regret not waiting a week to table your budget?
Well, the deficit certainly would have been billions of dollars less. Every dollar above that $60 budgeted mark is worth I think about $700 million to the Alberta Treasury. So it's now trading about $74 today, which is $14 above. So it's a good chunk of money. I failed math, but it's several billions of dollars. And it's not just the Alberta government. There's a lot of people in Canada that are going to make money off this war. The Energy Minister, Tim Hodgson, was in Toronto today saying, and the quote was, "We see money," right? Which is
maybe a bit crass, but
it's a bit crass, but it's not wrong. The potential is there for if this war goes on for a month or so, we could wipe out that deficit completely and actually run a budget surplus, which would had to be the greatest budget turnaround in budget history, I would think.
I mean, if it's it's like the 14 days war goes back, then the price probably reach somewhat more of an equilibrium again. But I think Nigel, U.S. and Israel, I don't think they thought that the Iranians were going to be able to shut down the Strait of Hormuz as effectively as they did, because they wiped out their navy. Their navy was no contest. Mm-hmm. They destroyed it. So I think they were thinking more conventionally that, the Iranian Navy doesn't stand a chance of blocking it. But what the Iranians did is they go and they scuttled one of their own oil tankers, and that got every insurance company on the planet to say, we're not covering oil tankers going through the strait right now. So everyone voluntarily shut their tankers down. So without really a military action, the Iranians managed still to shut it. The anti-air defenses against these the Iranians are now deploying hypersonic missiles. Not a lot of them are regular ballistics, but some of them are hypersonic. The missile interceptors are not as effective as they say they were in the 14 days war. They're pretty effective then, but the Iranians are now hitting all these Gulf countries that host American bases to try and get them to put pressure on the Americans to call this off. And that is now starting to do serious damage to the oil infrastructure around there. So even if this war is over in 14 days or something, and it's not looking like it will be right now, but who knows? Even if serious damage is done to the infrastructure over there, as much as I might think this is not a good war, we might come out ahead because oil infrastructure over there being seriously damaged, that will have knock-on effects for some time.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable expectation that Alberta can only do well out of this. It's kind of crass to point it out, but
Alberta secretly started this war to save the budget.
Yeah, that's right. What was Danielle Smith doing that weekend anyway?
So I think the Mossad's good. You should see the Rat Patrol.
As far as the exact way this war is conducted, the weapons used and how effective they are, there are people better qualified than me to pass an opinion. But to your point about the hypersonic missiles, I was not aware that the Iranians had received hypersonic missiles. They got everything else. But that's a very particular type of weapon that you wouldn't waste on an oil tanker. You would be looking for aircraft carriers with that one. But they can actually do the damage they want to do with drones that cost a couple of $100,000 a copy. Mm-hmm. And, the most sophisticated anti-aircraft defense system that you can build sort of can handle a number at a time, but a swarm of a couple of hundred?
Mm-hmm.
No. that's the leverage they have. So obviously, what we're seeing now is strikes on Iranian territory along the coast of the strait, particularly to just isolate and eliminate the launching pads for these things.
Well, and these things, the Iranians, they're launching different kinds of missiles here, but a lot of the ones they're launching, they cost about $250,000 a pop to build. Mm-hmm. I mean, to the average person paying taxes, that seems like a lot of money, but that is cheap like borscht for a missile.
A lot of bang for the buck.
Yeah, and most of these interceptors cost $2 million a pop, and you'd only have to fire several interceptors to have a pretty good chance of taking out a missile. The economics of this are not good. Now, the American economy is infinitely larger than the Iranian economy. The Israelis have a fairly strong economy. But the Iranians have figured out how to build this stuff cheaply and fast. So they might be able to keep this up for a while, and then you run out of interceptors. It's plausible, Dave, that, again, I'm making an argument just for purely crass self-interest for Alberta. Now, I'm on the other side. I'm like, yes, war is good for oil. It's not implausible that the Iranians are going to be able to do. Also, the Americans, the Gulf states are kind of getting very angry at the Americans because they've deployed the bulk of their interceptors to protect Israel, not the Gulf states, which they've vowed to protect here. So these guys are getting hit, and they were promised protection in this. So that oil infrastructure, if the Iranians can keep this up, could do a lot of damage to refineries, to shipping facilities. This could shut down major oil production or retard oil production in the Middle East for quite a while to come.
I didn't think you could use that word.
Retard is back. Okay. And I didn't even use it offensively in this way. This was purely analytic.
One of the big winners that may or may not come out of this is the Ukraine. They were getting pounded by Iranian-made drones given to Russia. And now that pipeline has dried up. Russia's not getting any more Iranian drones. So that will work well for Ukraine. And yeah, it's, I was talking to a friend in government yesterday. $100 oil is not out of the question if this all goes to hell.
I mean, yeah, there's so many ways we can follow this now, but the Ukraine war it's had like three very distinctive phases. You had an initial kind of blitzkrieg phase where the Russians were going to rush it with tanks and aircraft, and most people thought that would succeed. It did not. And then you had kind of a trench war. Then you went backwards to World War I style trench warfare. Now you're into very innovative drone warfare. The Instagram reels are wild to watch. This guy, we've never seen warfare like this, but it's been pioneered in Ukraine, and now we could see it. It's different. This is bombarding drones, but you want to bet that the the Iranians have certainly built kind of anti-personnel drones, so that if the Kurds start coming over, maybe they want to fight a typical kind of asymmetrical insurgency against the Iranian regime. I'm betting the Iranians have probably learned from the Ukrainians now, because the Iranian drone technology is cheap and effective, and they're watching what's happening in Ukraine. This would be drone warfare again, second drone war going on.
If it's still available. It may have been bombed out of existence by the Americans.
Maybe. I don't know. All right. We can talk this shit all day. But if there's any silver lining, it's that maybe this fixes the Alberta deficit. Temporarily, because we never seem to get spending under control. Okay. Put a pin in that there and have our parting shots. Nigel.
Yeah, well, to your last point there, Derek, about the never getting spending under control. So last year we had the teachers on strike, you had the doctors, the nurses asking for more money. It's the same all the time I mentioned last year, but it goes on and on and on. And always the advice from the general population, they deserve it, give them what they want. Well, that's most of where the deficit comes from. 80% of the provincial budget is wages, and 80% of that goes to those two professions, the medical profession and the teaching profession. So all of a sudden we have oil prices are down, or were down at the time, and and they present a deficit budget. Well, that's terrible. They got to get spending under control. It's the same people who are saying, give the doctors more money, give the nurses more money, give the teachers more money. But so, no, you've got to get spending under control. What do Albertans want?
Well, that's why every politician promises we're going to trim the fat. We're going to get rid of the unnecessary duplication and bureaucrats. Guess what? The government just has that no matter what. No matter what party's in power, you're always going to have that. So anytime the politicians come out and they don't give you very specific big line items what they're going to cut, it's the same bullshit.
Yep. That's the way it goes.
Cory.
Go back to the bumper sticker, which is a brilliant one that comes out about every 8 years. It says, "Oh God, let there be another oil boom. I promise not to piss it away this time." And we never learn. I wrote a column that'll come out in the Standard soon where I said the best time for Danielle Smith to cut spending is now when the oil prices are high.
Yep. Yeah.
I don't care. No excuses.
It's never when they do it, but yeah.
She hasn't cut a nickel.
No. Dave?
It's been a tough week to be British. Our Royal Air Force Base in Cyprus was bombed, and unfortunately every single ship in the formerly mighty British Navy was in port at the time. So Prime Minister Keir Starmer has dispatched a destroyer, but it will take a week to get there. So the RAF is under the protection of other people, I guess.
Purely personal, my nephew is in that very base at Akrotiri at the moment.
Oh, hopefully stay safe. Can we talk to him?
Yeah.
Well, I can say all I want, but he is professionally cautious about what he says to me.
And the week sort of ended yesterday with President Trump correctly noting that Keir Starmer, quote, is no Churchill.
All right. Well, you've all got war. I'm sick of war. Let's talk about the dad in Grand Prairie. This guy is he's trans and so thinks he's a woman. And he brutally stabbed and attempted to murder his own children. One child had, I think, 3/4 of her esophagus cut. Miraculously survived. This guy was, I guess, brought up on some kind of aggravated assault or something, but not even attempted murder. It's clearly attempted murder. He only got 5 years. And the Crown only asked for 5 years for a psychopath who brutally attempted to murder his own children. This guy is clearly nuttier than a fruitcake and should be locked up in a mental facility for a long time. But you notice when it's a trans person, they don't go like the route of crazy. They're just going to keep them in traditional corrections. This guy is clearly crazy. And there was a very heavy publication ban banning us from covering this, Dave. You and I talked about this God knows how many times. We broke the publication ban finally when this guy came out and posted a crazy maniacal video of himself on social media. We're like, well, he's broken it, so we can share his social media post. But we were banned by law from reporting on this for a long time for this psychopath, and he got only 5 years for attempting to murder his own children. This guy needs mental help, but he's not being put in a mental facility here. It's just the way we do business.
At least he had the sense not to commit a mischief charge in Ottawa.
Yep. Yeah, if he would have blown up a bouncy castle, he'd be facing a lot more. And it's worth pointing out, Grand Prairie, it's only, 2 hours away from Tumbler Ridge. It's the low, if you consider Grand Prairie a big place, it's the only big place near Tumbler Ridge. It's kind of the metro center of gravity for a place like Tumbler Ridge in the Peace Country. Okay. So, lots of break topics to end on today.
Roll sucks, Derek.
Yeah. Cory, Dave, Nigel, John on production, thank you very much. Thank you all of you for putting up with us today. Remember to go to westernstandard.news if you're not yet a member. Click on subscribe. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year for unlimited access to all Western Standard content and to support the work that we are doing here. Thank you very much for joining us today, and God bless.